The first warning came from the sea. In 1347, ships arrived in European ports carrying something no army could stop. The sailors were dying. Some were already dead. Their bodies were covered in dark swellings. Fever burned through them. Blood came from their mouths. And wherever the ships docked, the same horror followed. At first, people did not understand what they were seeing. Then the sickness moved into the streets, into homes, into churches, into castles. Within a few years, Europe would lose millions of people. Villages would vanish. Cities would fall silent. Families would be destroyed so quickly that the living could not bury the dead fast enough. People prayed. They begged. They blamed strangers. They blamed sin. They blamed God. But the plague did not answer. It only spread. This was the Black Death, and for many who lived through it, it did not feel like disease. It felt like the end of the world. Before the plague arrived, medieval Europe was already fragile. Most people lived close to hunger. Cities were crowded. Streets were dirty. Animals lived near humans. Waste ran through open spaces. Medicine was weak, and disease was often explained through religion, bad air, or divine punishment. People did not understand bacteria. They did not understand fleas. They did not understand how something invisible could move from body to body and city to city. So when the plague came, Europe faced it almost blind, and that blindness made the terror worse, because people could see death everywhere, but they could not see the enemy. The plague reached Europe through trade routes. Goods moved, people moved, ships moved, and with them came infected rats, fleas, and sickness. When plague ships entered harbors, they carried more than cargo. They carried panic. Port cities were hit first. Then merchants, travelers, soldiers, and refugees carried the disease inland. The plague moved faster than rumor. A town could hear that another city was dying. Then, days later, its own people began to fall. There was no safe wall, no locked gate strong enough, no prayer loud enough to stop it. Once the plague entered a city, everyone waited to see whose house death would choose first. The symptoms were terrifying. A person could seem alive and working one day, then collapse the next. Fever, pain, vomiting, weakness, dark swellings under the arms, in the neck, or near the groin. These swellings were called buboes. For many, they were a death sentence. Families watched helplessly as loved ones changed before their eyes. A mother could wake with fever. A child could begin shaking. A father could disappear into delirium. And because the disease spread so quickly, fear broke even the strongest bonds. Some people stayed and cared for the sick. Others ran. Not always because they were cruel, because they were terrified. The plague forced people into impossible choices. Stay with the person you love and risk dying, or leave them alone and live with the guilt. As death multiplied, cities changed. Markets emptied. Workshops closed. Church bells rang so often that in some places they stopped ringing them. The sound became too much. Bodies filled homes. Bodies lay in streets. Gravediggers could not keep up. Priests died while blessing the dying. Doctors died while trying to treat the sick. Officials died before they could give orders. The normal rules of life collapsed. People who had spent their entire lives fearing judgment, law, and reputation suddenly watched society itself break apart. A city full of voices became a city of doors marked by sickness. A city of footsteps fading. A city where the living avoided eye contact because everyone was wondering the same thing. Am I next? When people cannot understand disaster, they often search for someone to blame. During the Black Death, fear turned violent. Some blamed foreigners, Some blamed the poor. Some blamed sinners. Some blamed religious minorities, especially Jewish communities, falsely accusing them of poisoning wells. These accusations were lies, but panic does not need truth to become dangerous. Across parts of Europe, innocent people were attacked, expelled, or killed. The plague was already destroying bodies. Fear destroyed morality. That is one of the darkest truths of the Black Death. Disease was not the only killer. Human panic became its own plague. Many believed the plague was punishment from God. Churches filled with desperate people. Priests led prayers. Processions moved through streets. Some groups whipped themselves in public, believing pain might cleanse sin and stop divine anger. But nothing seemed to work. The righteous died. The wicked died. The rich died. The poor died. Children died. Priests died. Kings and peasants both feared the same invisible enemy. The plague stripped away the illusion that status could protect anyone. Gold could buy food. It could buy shelter. It could buy servants. But it could not buy immunity. Death had become democratic, and that shook medieval Europe to its core. By the time the first great wave passed, Europe was changed forever. Too many people were gone. Villages stood empty. Fields were abandoned. Workshops closed. Homes remained silent because entire families had disappeared. But the survivors now lived in a different world. Before the plague, most peasants had little power. They worked the land, obeyed their lords, and accepted the life they were born into. After the plague, labor became rare. Suddenly, workers mattered more. A surviving peasant could demand better wages. A servant could leave for better work. Landowners still wanted the old system, but the old system had been damaged. The church was shaken too. People had prayed, begged, and confessed, but the plague still came. They had watched priests die like everyone else. Faith did not disappear, but certainty did. The Black Death did not only kill millions, it broke confidence in the old order. It made Europe question power, faith, medicine, and the rules that had controlled life for centuries. The plague ended, but the world before it never fully came back. The Black Death was more than a disease. It was a mirror. It showed Europe how fragile its cities were, how weak its medicine was, how quickly fear could turn people against each other, how helpless kings looked when death entered the room, and how thin the line was between civilization and collapse. For the people who lived through it, the plague was not a chapter in a history book. It was the empty chair at the table, the locked door of a neighbor's house, the silence after the church bell stopped, the grave dug too quickly, the family name that ended overnight. Europe survived, but it did not survive unchanged. The Black Death broke the medieval world open, and from the ruins, something different slowly began to rise. Because sometimes history does not change through kings, battles, or empires. Sometimes it changes through a whisper in a port city, a fever in the night, a ship arriving from the sea, and death stepping quietly onto the shore.